This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, it's Selena, and you're listening to Stories from Planet Earth. Today we have on Mari.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for taking some time to be on the podcast this week.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to kind of discuss what we are going to discuss today and get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm excited and also nervous and just want to choose my words carefully and represent what I feel is best to represent right now.
Yeah, I have no doubt that you're going to do a great job.
Thank you.
All right, so I always start out just kind of asking my guests where they're from and where they currently live. So let's just start from where you're originally from.
Yeah, I was born in Soda Springs, Idaho. It's probably a town you've never heard of or anyone else. And then I moved to Texas, and that's where I was mostly raised. And then for college, I moved to Colorado.
How did you decide that you wanted to go to college in Colorado?
It was a school assignment that I needed to apply to a college. And I never really felt like I was going to go to college. And then I applied to UCCS with really not that much intention to go. And surprisingly, I got in, and that acceptance letter felt great. And then I toured the school, and luckily enough, I had the means and the support, the financial support to go and to come here to go to school. So it just kind of all fell into place for me.
Yeah, and did you enjoy your time there as a student?
Yeah, I definitely did. It's an invaluable experience, something that I'm grateful to have gone through.
Yeah, definitely. So getting into the rest of the interview, could you share a little bit about what your experience growing up as a person of color was like, and before we jump into that, just kind of tell my audience what you identify as in that realm?
Yeah, I identify as half black, half white. My mother was white, my father was black. I grew up in my mother's predominantly white household, and I am also a person of color because when you look at me, you do see brown skin. And growing up, obviously it was different for me, being seen as a person of color. I had a lot of white friends. My school that I went to was, I would say, 50% white, 50% person of color and other. And having most of my friends be white, I knew that they couldn't share in my experience. And looking back on it, it was subtle bullying that I endured from them until finally in high school I said enough is enough, and I don't want any more black jokes. It's not funny anymore. And I until it was like my senior year in high school, I really didn't know how to stand up for myself. And tell other people, yeah, I am black and I am proud. And I always brushed it off. I tried not to be too affected by it. I do have something that's called light skin privilege, and that means that I don't have as much melanin as my darker toned brother or sister. Therefore, somehow I still have the privilege of being listened to and acknowledged more than those who are darker toned. And within that, I do feel a sense of guilt right now for not using my voice sooner to amplify the voices that do matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people are kind of facing right now. Like, I know I am also kind of feeling a similar way. Like, I wish I would have talked about this a lot sooner and been more vocal about it a lot sooner. So I think you're not alone in that for sure. And I think that everybody kind of needs to evaluate how we're using our voices in this time.
Most definitely, yeah.
So I was wondering, what has it been like being in an interracial couple, and have you encountered any challenges either externally or internally within that?
Yeah, being in an interracial couple from the beginning, the relationship is 100% based on love, no matter what. And luckily enough, my husband is already pretty woke about his privilege. And I remember in the very beginning of our relationship having discussions, and he would listen very intently about my experience as a Black woman in America, especially in Colorado Springs, where it's 75% of the population is white. He has always been very supportive of me. And now that things have definitely come to a boiling point, he is making sure to be very careful of his words, very comforting when I need it, and to rally behind me and be my ally in this time. I woke up crying, I think it was 3 days after the murder of George Floyd. And I said, we have to go protest. I said, we have to go do this. And I'm scared. And I know you're scared. And he said, we're going to do this no matter what for you. And he's just been super supportive. His family, on the other hand, I do believe I'm the first Black person in his family. And I don't know if they initially recognized the amount of pain that I've been in because of all of this. The amount of pain that, I'm sure every American's feeling pain right now. However, his family will never experience what it's like to be a Black person in America. And I had to convince them of that. Luckily, they were able to listen to me and finally say that they hear me and support me. It just took a little bit of convincing, which was absolutely draining on me for a few days.
Yeah, I could imagine. And so, if you wouldn't mind, do you have any just words of advice for anybody who might be in a similar situation where they're in an interracial couple and these are things that, need to be addressed?
Yeah, I would say try your best to come from a place of empathy. I have to empathize with the fact that Christopher, being a cis white male, has never felt what it was like to be discriminated against. It's a feeling that is of the utmost privilege. And I had to be patient with him in understanding why I'm so passionate about this. Luckily, he's always been able to listen to me and empathize with me. I wish upon all couples that we can try to feel what it's like to walk in the other's shoes right now and think about the entire life experience that the other person has had up until this point, as to why they might be feeling a type of way right now. And then let's move the discussion towards getting on the same page. towards enacting the change that we need for this country so that everyone can feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So you studied psychology in college. Does that shape your view on the racial tensions in the United States at all?
Most definitely. It wasn't until a college class that I had, it's either social psychology or a class that was called Why Science Matters, that was based on the views of a philosopher, a psychologist, and an anthropologist. And they all came together. And in that class, I finally learned why people are racist. It stems from fear, and then fear can manifest in many different ways, in anger, depression, anxiety. The term is called cognitive dissonance. It's the feeling of not being able to understand something, and maybe even getting angry at yourself that you can't understand something. And then that anger turns into projection, and it goes outward. And it also has a lot to do with terror management theory, which is the theory that anything that conflicts with your beliefs or your life views is something that you need to stay away from, because it innately reminds one of their own death. If you challenge a Christian's views about God 100%, are they going to be reminded of their afterlife and whether or not they want to go to heaven or hell? And when people can't understand these differences, the cognitive dissonance builds to unbelievable amounts, and that is when hatred shows its face. And that's the root of racism in our country and all around us and all around the world. And if people can have an awareness of this, an awareness of the need to protect oneself at all costs, even your psyche, once you have an awareness of this, you can challenge it, and you can say, like, no matter how I'm feeling right now, I need to put my feelings aside to listen to this other person, to listen to this other idea or belief that is different from my own. And in that way, you can learn from your experiences, from the people, you can learn from other people's experiences around you too.
Wow, that is really interesting.
It's something I've been thinking about more and more.
Yeah. I mean, it's so relevant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are currently in the midst of a really historic moment. People all over the country and all over the world are protesting the death of George Floyd and countless other Black people who have experienced police brutality. Mm-hmm. Could you share your thoughts about what's going on currently?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that people are talking about with these protests. It's hard because we need to keep the discussion about being about the movement, about the Black Lives Matter movement. However, if people need these things explained to them, then they need that explanation to be able to focus on the movement. There's the argument of all lives matter, and no one's saying that all lives don't matter. No, everyone wants all lives to matter, and we need Black lives to matter right now in order for us to get there. Some people are saying that the violence takes away from what the peaceful protesters are trying to do. When there's a lot of different viewpoints and there's a lot of different media outlets that are censoring the news and or only showing the parts of the protests that get violent. We need to hold those news sources accountable for not showing the entire picture, because 99% of the protesters are peaceful. And there are those few that do want to cause a ruckus, that do want to have their own agenda and push something other than the Black Lives Matter movement right now. And they're taking it upon themselves to cause violence. And people also need to recognize that the police aren't innocent in all of this. Another discussion is people saying all cops are bad, or not all cops are bad. It's just a few bad apples that ruin the bunch. If not all cops are truly bad, and they also want to seek justice, then they need to be also encouraging their fellow police officers who are corrupt to be charged. They should also be promoting more education for police officers so that they can serve and protect their communities. And I haven't seen much of that. And it, like I said, it's just hard to keep the discussion about Black Lives Matter when people are wanting to point out the rioting, the fact that, you know, their family member is a cop, or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it's just so many people in this discussion now, more people than I've ever seen engaging with this before. So it's just kind of a cluster online right now, all of the different things that are being discussed. But you're right, like at the root of it, we need to be pushing this core value or thought that Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And that's like what we should be discussing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I appreciate all of the people protesting. It brings me comfort that people are speaking out against this and speaking out for Black Lives Matter. And it's really showing some people's true colors on the matter, if they're going to speak out about this or not. It's hard to say what side you're on at this point if you just stay silent. And I don't want to say that silence is 100% complacency or non-supportive. But it feels like the whole world is asking you to say that you care for humans, you care for Black people too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have attended some protests yourself. What has that been like?
It was very empowering to use my voice among what seemed like hundreds of others, and amplify our voices. It was this sense of camaraderie that we will protect each other, we will speak out for each other. I don't know if I feel entirely comfortable saying this, but it's something that I've been thinking about. I hear my grandfather's voice in my head. He was in the military, and he would always say that he joined the military to fight for these freedoms, to fight for the pursuit of happiness, whatever that may be for an individual, as long as it's not hurting anybody else. My grandfather would say he and my great-grandfather would never, ever tolerate bullies, bigots, or racists. This is coming from my white grandfather who says, I see no color, I see your heart. And it feels as though I am going to fight this fight, and having people stand with me Not that we are military-esque, but we have that brotherhood of standing together for the same thing that we believe in. I'd also like to touch on the point of some people saying they see no color. While the sentiment is 100% there, and I feel it, and I love that that is something they can do, not everyone does that. And because of that, you have to see my color. You have to acknowledge that I am in pain and that I honestly have been fearing for my life and the life of my brothers and sisters just because of the way that I look. And you have to see that now. And you can't ignore it. And I need that support. I need those allies who do see my color and hear me and support me right now.
Yeah, definitely. Since you touched on allies, I'm curious, what would you like to see from those that are trying to be an ally right now?
I would definitely like to see more than them posting a black square.
Yeah.
I would like to see people amplifying the voices of Black members of the community, Black members of the country. If you feel as though you don't have any personal comments on what's happening right now, repost something that is helpful, that is informative. Repost even just a legal document of the changes that we're calling for with a hashtag Black Lives Matter. I would like to see people not trying to compare their own experiences of discrimination. I had a conversation with my mother-in-law, and don't get me wrong, I appreciate her sentiment. However, when I was telling her she doesn't know what it's like to be Black in America, she responded with saying, well, you know, I know what it's like because I hear stories, and I know what it's like because I am a woman in a man's territory. And while everyone should know what it feels like at this point to, or at least try to empathize with those who have been discriminated against, she doesn't know and will never know, no matter what she does or anyone does, what it's like to be Black in America. And recognize that feeling and sit with that feeling and meditate on it for a while. And I think you'll begin to hear more of the Black voices around you simply saying that they want to be heard and supported, empathized with, and loved. I would love for people to act with the urgency that we need right now to promote politicians, either locally or federally, that not only are saying, are calling or advocating for the change that we need right now, but those that have the good track record of supporting these movements from the beginning of their political career all the way through to right now. Because if you have someone who's just going to change their mind the instant people say something, it's hard to trust that person to do the right thing. And I'd like people to talk about racism, especially if you're white, talk about racism with other people, and learn how to be peacefully, respectfully, and actively anti-racist in your communities. That being said, that meaning do not tolerate any sort of racist behavior ever again. Don't shrug it off. Don't even chuckle about it. I've called out my brother-in-law for being racist before, and I feel almost betrayed by myself that I didn't shut it down. Instead, I said, okay, whatever. because I was just trying to have a peaceful evening of laughter and drinks with family. But I should have asked him to leave if he couldn't stop being racist. I need people to have discussions about this and how to be allies and how to amplify the Black voices around you, and never tolerate racist behaviors from family, friends, coworkers, teachers, students, politicians, the guy at the gas station, anything. Call them out peacefully and respectfully, and then point out that they need to change that. And I need some people to just put their feelings aside right now. And I know that's hard because we're all going through it, and we're all going through our own. And right now, it feels as though our country is damn near at war with people in power and the white supremacies that are happening. And you need to pick a side, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have any closing thoughts at all, or things that you would like to shout out before we close out?
Yeah, just be active, be progressive. Things will never be the same again, and things can never be the same again. I'd also like to say that justice has not been shown for Breonna Taylor yet. And if you haven't, go to change.org to sign that petition and read her story, hear her story, feel her story, because we need a lot more love and empathy right now. And I can only hope with all of my heart that I don't have to explain to my children, my biracial, colored children, that they might not be safe in America.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to talk about all of this. I know it takes a lot of energy and effort to do something like this, and that's definitely not lost on me. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And here's to continuing that good fight and continuing this discussion.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me this platform to be able to speak, and I hope a lot of people get to hear it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Stories from Planet Earth. If you have some time, leave us a review, and be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram at SFPE Podcasts. I'll talk to you next week.